I wonder if the guys who are presenting now will have the possibility to share their presentation. That's something that I don't know. Because I'm not that familiar with Zoom. If you're familiar with Zoom, I started the meeting. Can anyone else share their screen?
I try. You have to enable it now. I tried to share the screen and it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
You have to allow all the participants to share the screen below in the share screen. You can choose to allow all participants.
It says varios participantes pueden compartir de forma simultánea. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because below I have it says opciones avanzadas de la función compartir. Do I need to go to that?
No, the previous option.
Okay, thank you so much, Camila. Appreciate it. We are 8 participants. We were 9 before. Natalie's not here. Anyone who's presenting here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
But Alejandro is trying to connect because he's using, he doesn't have a Wi-Fi. He's using los datos, los datos del teléfono.
Yeah, me too. It's really something. Yeah. So Carla, so you're giving the presentation with Alejandro and
Natalia.
Natalia. Okay. Yes. And is Natalia having issues as well to get into the room?
No, she's trying to help Alejandro.
Okay.
I think maybe they are talking in the phone. I don't know.
Okay, here's Natalia arriving.
Okay.
All right. So I really need to change this setting, and Miguel is arriving as well, because I have to admit students, people in the room, and I don't want to do that. I just want everyone to just join the meeting. Anyway, I'll work that out later. So Natalia, Carla, please, Alejandro is arriving now. Try to see if you can share your desktop.
Okay.
Okay, so you take over the session.
Can you see? Not yet.
Hi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Okay, I'm going to silence myself now.
Sorry for all the inconvenience.
No problem.
Okay, I'm ready.
Carla, you're ready?
Yes.
Okay, let's start then.
So good morning, everyone, professor, classmates. And today we're going to present our book report about the murders in the Rue Morgue by Edgar Allan Poe, sorry. Our group is composed by Carla Estuardo, Alejandro Fuentes, and who is presenting now, Natalia Correa. To start this presentation, I'm going to contextualize a little bit about the period in which was developed this tale written by Poe. The Romantic period, or Romanticism, is seen as a way of thinking that values the individual over the group, the subject over the objective, and a person's emotional experience over the reason. It also values the wildness of nature, which is important, and over the human-made order. Romanticism was embraced by the American writers in the early 19th century. Also, this period presented a shift from logical to thinking base of emotions, and it is served as a critique of the Enlightenment and the Puritan ages. Additionally, this philosophical movement places importance on imagination, which is so important. The emotions, nature, and the individuality. During a time when the Industrial Revolution was sweeping across America and people were being replaced by machines, this romantic literature put emphasis on the individuals. So the Romantics believed that people were inherently good at discovery, came through intuition and the feelings. A defining trait of the Romantic era and the major critique of the Enlightenment, as I said before, was the creativity was more highly valued over logic. Also, this period had three major branches: transcendentalism, sentimentalism, and the dark Gothic Romanticism. But it's the last one in which I'm going to talk a little bit more now. The Dark Romantics or the Gothic literature compared to the other two branches, this Gothic literature was a little bit different. But why? Because it characterized by the preoccupation with gloom, mystery, and terror. It often also included supernatural elements. These, all the Gothics believed that evil manifested itself in, how can I say, in an individual when they were isolated from the other people. It is believed that is a type of imitation to medievalism also. When it was launched in the later 18th century, the Gothic featured accounts of terrifying experiences in these ancient castles. Experiences connected with the subterranean dungeons, secret passageways, flickering lamps, screams, moans, bloody hands, ghosts, even graveyards, and the rest of the human body feelings. Also, this type of novels, since basically they come from the hand of the Industrial Revolution, as I said, this Industrial Revolution is giving him an optimism towards the scientific advances and the belief that the human being, with his intelligence, can give a solution to any problem that may arise. On the other hand, this Industrial Revolution makes a new social class, which is the middle class. All know the middle class. This middle class was earning in that time a lot of money thanks to the exploitation of the workers and raw materials in those huge factories. So they have to protect those benefits, making individuals divide between these criminals and people of impeccable morality. At this time is when the first publication on real crimes arise, spreading the fear of the population towards the criminal. Also appears the professional police, introducing these innovative elements. Additionally, these novels has key elements that characterize them. For example, a mystery that is necessary to solve, the murder and the resolution, which involves knowing who did it and how the murderer did it, sorry. delaying as much as possible the story. And this is the start point in which the detective becomes the new modern hero who confronts the criminal using their physical force. Sorry, not using their physical force as other stories, but using their intelligence. Here is where the brilliant but eccentric detectives appear in those stories. Go ahead, Carla, please. Okay, the author. The author of this tale is Edgar Allan Poe. As all we know, Edgar Allan Poe was an American poet, critic, short writer of stories, and author of these mystery novels. But Poe didn't have an easy life because his parents died before he was 3 years old. So the tragedy accompanied him since childhood. Also, his life was marked by the deaths of opium, alcohol, gambling, and by serious economic difficulties caused, above all, his determination to live from literature when the copyright wasn't paid in that time. He married with his cousin Virginia when she was 13, and Poe 27. But despite all this vital perimeter, there was a period of his life of some tranquility and a stable job as literary critic. It is in this moment of his life when he publishes this tale, the Murders of the Rue Morgue, and this tale was published in 1841 in the Graham magazines. After a year of the publication of this tale, his wife Virginia gets sick with tuberculosis. Her condition destabilizes him and returns again, as I mentioned, to alcohol and opium. However, he continues writing and publishing more detective novels. And also in the following years, he publishes The Mystery of the Marie Roget, that also comes with the main character in this tale, which is Monsieur Dupin, to solve the crime. Later, he publishes The Golden Bag, and finally, The Purloined Letter. In 1847, his wife dies, and 2 years after, and since the publications of the Murders in the Rue Morgue, Poe appears in the street of Baltimore, disoriented, delirious, wearing clothes that don't belong to him. So he was transferred to the hospital, but he finally dies on October the 7th in 1949. He died only at the age of 40, and even today is still unknown the cause of his death, which is a completely mystery as his literary works. Thanks to Poe's psychological thrilling tales, we can examine the depths of the human psyche and his darkly passionate sensibility that that earned him much fame during his lifetime, but even after his death. Okay, Carla, go ahead.
Okay, so for the organization, we have that this tale, the murders in the Rue Morgue. Give me a second.
Yes.
Can you hear me, right? Okay. This tale is divided into 6 parts. Part 1 is about the introduction of the characters. Here you can see a brief description of how the character is and his sidekick. In part 2, we have the introduction of the murder through a newspaper. Okay, so here the protagonists know about what happened in the morgue. In part 3, we have that the two characters decided to investigate on their own due to the lack of professionalism carried out by the police. In part 4, we have how the characters knew what happened in the crime scene. In the 5th part, consists about the shocking discovery of the perpetrator. And finally, in part 6, we have all the final details that happened during the murders. And of course, closing the case. Next one, please. Okay, so for the summary. Like I said at the beginning, the story begins when the two characters, the narrator and Dupin, met in a library looking for a book in common. And after that, well, it happens like 2 or 3 times, and that they were looking for a book and they meet each other. So they decided to live together and to be separated from the world. So they didn't have guests, and they spared their time with a book and of course with each other. Dupin's favorite part of the day was nighttime. So at nighttime, they usually go for strolls. And during one of those strolls, Dupin is able to detect his friend's inner thoughts by following a series of mental clues, like following all the details. For example, his friend, if he was looking for something, he was able to detect what he was thinking at that time. So here we can see the mental ability, the cleverness of the protagonist. So we can then understand how he can resolve this problem. And then one day they were looking at a newspaper and they found out that 2 women, a mother and a daughter, were found dead. The corpse of the daughter was strangled and was pulled out of the chimney, and the mother was decapitated. In the newspaper said that most of the testimonies appear that that in that place, in the house, I mean, all the witnesses revealed different facts, but the 2 facts that remained the same among the testimonies were that one voice was a foreigner, was an undescribable voice, probably a foreigner, and the other man was French. It also says in the newspaper that nobody knows how the perpetrators ran out of the house. The police weren't sure if it was a murder or if it was suicide. For example, if the mother killed the daughter and then he cut her throat. It also says in the newspaper that Adolphe Le Bon, the man who escorted the mother because she withdrew a large amount of money, 4,000 francs in gold, was arrested because he was the last person to be seen with the mother. So in that moment, Dupin criticized the French that they were not looking for everything. They were just looking for the things that they saw in the crime scene and nothing more. So he decided to investigate on his own because Le Bon, the man who was arrested, did a favor for him. So that's the moment when they decided to investigate on their own. When they arrived to the crime scene, the narrator, his sidekick, he didn't saw anything different that the newspaper said. So in his mind, he thought that, I mean, he agreed with the newspaper and with the police prefecture that this mystery didn't have any solution. And at the end, Dupin, he asked for his friend if he saw anything unusual. But Dupin thought that the newspaper were guilty of the opinion of the police due to the different testimonies. And the police thought that, of course, this case was a dead end. However, Dupin already knew the perpetrator. Carla, go ahead.
Okay, after that, Dupin kept going on with his monologue about the murder, and he pointed the author to the fact that everyone agreed that one voice was French, and that nobody wanted to say that the other voice belonged to their country. Also, he figured it out that the perpetrators escaped through the window when he carefully studied the room. He already made a theory about how they got in and out, but the boss of it required lots of handiness. So he also considered the great amount of money left in the house and the strength necessary to get a body into a chimney. All of his observations made the author believe that the perpetrator was a lunatic from the hospital that was nearby. But Dupin proved his opinions to be wrong. He took the hair that was in the hand of the mother, and it wasn't even similar to human hair, as the fingerprints on the daughter's neck weren't human too. Dupin showed the author an article about an orangutan from the island whose fingerprints matches the one from the daughter's neck. The author still couldn't understand the mystery of the two cases, but Dupin thought that there was a Frenchman who knew about the murder, but he ran away, and also he thought that the orangutan was still walking free. Dupin placed an article in the newspaper that he had an orangutan in his apartment that belonged to a sailor. He came to that conclusion when he finds a ribbon tie into a specific knot that a sailor knows how to make. His suspicions became real when they heard steps, and a sailor came into their apartment in search for an orangutan. He offered them money as a reward for finding the animal, but instead of money, Dupin asked him to tell them about the murder. So he went to the door and looked them and placed his gun on the table. The sailor told them that he caught the animal with a friend that died, and after his death, he hid the orangutan in his apartment, and one day he found him trying to shave. This is because probably he saw the sailor doing it. And when he took out his whip, the animal ran out through the window. The sailor followed him, and the orangutan spotted the window. So it means that the murder occurred there in the way Dupin described it, and the owner caught the orangutan, and Le Bon was released from prison.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, moving to the characters. The first and main character of this tale was Monsieur C. Auguste Dupin, who is a Parisian crime solver, and he becomes famous after discovering the truth behind these violent murders of two women after the Paris police arrest the wrong man. He employs psychological analysis and intuition, and also he considers possibilities not imagined by the police to conclude that the murders were committed by an orangutan. Dupin comes from a great family that's fallen on hard times. This means that he has a private income, but it still has no live on a tight budget. As a result, he doesn't have to work for a living, but also doesn't have this social or political obligation of someone from an aristocratic background who still has a lot of money. Dupin prefers looking at people instead to interact with them. He and the narrator, his friend, never go out during the day, but they love to walk around the Parisian streets at night, checking out the people around them and guessing who they are and where they're from, which is so interesting. The second character is the narrator, the unnamed narrator. He is a friend and housemate of Dupin. This narrator attempts to provide us an objective chronicle of the crime, but his tone celebrates Dupin's brilliance and intelligence. There is more about the narrator, but we are going to talk about him in the following slides, okay? The following characters are Madame Lispean. Sorry, so difficult to pronounce. She is older and one of the two Parisian murder victims. She dies from cutthroat, and his head was thrown through the window to a courtyard below to her apartment by this huge orangutan. The second woman is Mademoiselle Camille, the daughter of Madame Lispean. Mademoiselle Camille was choked to death by the murderer and then stuffed into the chimney where she was found by the police. Go ahead, Carla. Thank you. The following character is the orangutan. It was the murderer of this story. It was an ape brought from the Borneo island to Paris by the owner, who is the sailor, which is the following character. This sailor is the owner of the orangutan. He witnesses the two murders, but is unable to interfere. His inability to restrain the orangutan is also represented. It also represents the limits of the Paris police to imagine a non-human explanation to the vicious murders. And the last but not least is Adolphe Le Bon, who is a bank clerk and the first suspect in these two murders, and obviously incarcerated by the police, which is the main reason why Dupin wanted to participate in solving this murder. Okay, go ahead, Carla, please. Thank you.
Okay, the setting and the historical setting. The setting of this story first starts in the library in the Rue Montmartre in Paris, where the narrator meets Auguste Dupin when they were both searching for the same book. They decide to move in together, which is where they heard the story of the murders in the Rue Morgue. Auguste Dupin decides, after reading about the crime in the newspaper, that he can solve what the police cannot. The city of Paris is the main setting of this story. It occurs during the mid-19th century. And first of all, we have to know that the first detective agency in the world was founded in Paris. And something that really grabbed our attention is that it is not sure that Poe visited Paris during his life, but he was so precise about every setting in the story and how they played an important role to make the story more real, even though there were places which were fictional. The places chosen by Poe were all related to old aristocracy, something that called the attention of the readers and also make us think that the narrator and Dupin were both probably bohemian and sensitive, as they lived in a grotesque mansion and in an aristocratic neighborhood. Another important set is the Rue Morgue, or the street morgue. And this was a fictional place. It is where the murders take place and where the story ends once Dupin solves the murders of Madame L'Espanaye and Mademoiselle Camille. At this time, Paris was one of the great 19th century cosmopolitan centers, a place where many people of different ethnicities and nationalities live side by side. This point is surprisingly important to the plot of the murders in the Rue Morgue, because the different testimonies presented in the story were not just from French people, but also people from Italy, England, Spain, and others. Besides that, Paris was the perfect place to set this story because as Dupin's best ability was observation of human faces and behaviors, Poe needed a city that can give him lots of opportunities to see people's faces every day. And during the 19th century, new population was traveling to the city by railway lines every day.
Okay, so like Natalia said, now we're going to go deeper into the narrator. This type of narrator is an observant one, and the story is told in a first-person format. The most curious aspect of this narrator is that he has a unique, special bond with the protagonist. He is his closest friend, or rather, the only friend, and he's sort of a sidekick. He admires Dupin's intelligence and cunning and how his mind works in general. When you read this story, you can see or probably get the idea that there was some sort of homoerotic feelings coming from the narrator points of view in an implicit way, as if he was in love with him. But this is because during the story, he's constantly amazed how Dupin's work. And there's in the figures of the speech that I'm going to talk about later, you are going to see some examples of how this is putting in the story. But they have a special bond, and of course they decide, and the narrator convinced Dupin to live together actually because of their financial problems. But they only live together, and because in this story it is supposed that the narrator is just is not we can say that he's an average guy, and he's more like he's focused on what he can see, for example, during the story, and that is the contrast between Dupin and the narrator, and his function is primarily to emphasize and to highlight the good traits or the incredible and amazing skills that Dupin has. Yes, that's it. I know, Carla, you can. Yeah.
Okay, the tone of this story is suspenseful and also curious, since a good mystery story makes you wonder many questions while you are reading. Questions like, is this detail important, or is it a clue? And besides that, during the story, the narrator encourages the contact curiosity by saying some phrases like, you astonish me, or how was it possible? These comments were all directed to Dupin's crazy deductions. After all, as there is not too much emotion involved in all of this story, Poe has to find something else to draw in the readers. And that something else is the overall tone of intellectual interest and also suspense.
Okay, so for the symbolism, in this tale, it is a really particular one because for example, in other tales like the Black Cat, the Fatal Heart, and many other post tales, this is not much related with fantasy and ambiguity, for example. So it's more centralized on facts at the beginning, because Poe wanted to make this tale some sort of a puzzle for the reader. And even though there's, for example, objects like some nails that they discover, or for example, the razor, or some physical objects, they do not have the abstract representation that a symbol could have. So in this case, the biggest symbol that we have are the protagonists, Dupin, the police prefecture, and the orangutan. First, the Dupin is a representation of a whist player. Whist is a card game which was very popular in France during the 19th century, in which two people have to compete against each other and have to bet some money. So the player have to most of the time think about out of the box. That's the idea that that Poe wanted to represent. In the case of the police prefecture, it was a symbolism of a chess player. Why a chess player? Because when you're playing chess, you have to see all for example, the chessboard and the pieces to make the next move. So you can only act according to what you are seeing. So that's why there's a comparison or a symbol of the police prefecture, because when they were at the crime scene, they only see what they all the clues that they saw were that they saw. Okay, so for example, they couldn't think out of the box like Dupin was doing, for example. And finally, we have the orangutan, which represents the irrational emotion that of the human nature, and how violent and primitive the human can be. And that's the difference, or the two parts of the spectrum. We have Dupin and we have the orangutan. So that's what Poe wanted to represent. Next one.
Okay, the themes presented in this story are the following. The first one is cunning and cleverness. The narrator and the protagonist spend a lot of time showing what kind of intelligence are valuable and what kinds are not. And Dupin distinguishes himself from the police because while they are both analytical and cunning in their way, Dupin has the imagination to think outside of conventional assumptions. Dupin's genius for observation is incompatible with social interaction, so he uses human emotions as evidence in his chains of reasoning rather than as a means for bonding with others. Besides that, the narrator sets up the case of the murders in the room morgue as proof that superior reasoning allows the human mind to make guesses at the stuff beyond its knowledge, and then back it up with cold and hard evidence. The next theme is justice and judgment. The man who investigates the murder is not a real detective, but instead he studies the crime for his own amusement. Also, he doesn't attempt to solve the crime for money, but rather in the interest of truth and justice, as an innocent man is accused of the murder. It is also important to say that crime was a popular topic of the time, as there was a lot of urban development going on, and people were becoming more fearful and mindful of the possibility of crime. Newspapers were beginning to report murders and criminal trails, and both London and American cities were developing their early professional police forces in order to control some of the dangerous behavior. The next theme is death.
Carla?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you because but we have running out of time with this session, but we can start in the another session to continue, okay?
Yes.
Exactly. As Natalia said, we're running out of time for this session. We're going to end up at any moment.